Thank you, musicians. Let's clap for them again. Love that. So blessed to have a place to come and worship, be with our friends. Here's some good word. All the lights are back on. I can see their faces now. How are y'all doing? Good. My name's Tommy. What's yours? I heard like 4 names. Okay, my name's Tommy. What's yours? Here and there. Huh? Go ahead. It's a noun. It's a proper noun. I'm glad y'all are here, and I'm glad to be here. My name's Tommy. The person who normally would be here, maybe delivering an inspiring message that would make you think, ponder, maybe cry, I don't know. They're gone. They're on a mission trip. They're like at the Texas-Mexico border doing magic stuff. It's pretty, not magic, but like magical mission work. It's really good stuff. Better late than never. Or I should say better late than later. Hi, Johan. Good to see you, bud. I'm glad he's here. Okay, so my name's Tommy. I go to this church. I've been going to this church for like 25 years with my wife, and I've been working in the youth for like 20 years. It's been really good stuff. Zach's my friend. He was in the youth. He's one of my Sunday school kids, and Johan's one of my Sunday school kids, and yeah, it's good stuff. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to meet some of y'all. Like I said, normally I'm not here, but if you come back, not next week, because there's no refuge next week, but in 2 weeks, you'll get a little sweet reunion. If you're new here, because I know there's some visitors now, a little sweet reunion with Mike and the rest of the kids who are on mission right now. So, but I've got a little bit of message. I can't believe they let me do this. They let me come up and talk and everything. After the last incident that happened up here, I can't believe they let me do this again. This is where you're supposed to say, like, what happened? I can't talk about it. Per the settlement, I can't talk about it. I'm just kidding. I'm being silly. It's a good opportunity to be here. Do y'all remember COVID? Do y'all remember that? The pandemic and everything? What happened to that? What happened to COVID? Okay, when you think back, because it's been like 2 years, when you're going to think back, because you're going to be 14 or 16 or 25, what are you going to remember most about COVID this whole time? You had to stay at home. The mask. What about you? I know. Do you miss them? Is this better or is it worse? You're right. It's really odd not seeing people's faces, not having interactions, and in school. And I can't even imagine it for y'all, because if you're going to school, it's even been more of an extreme kind of adjustment. So anyway, for me, the pandemic has meant learning TikTok dances. So what I've done is I've prepared some of my favorite, and if you know these, I want you to come up now and do them with me, okay? I'm just kidding. There's no TikTok dances. But I have been watching some TikTok, and I try to measure myself, because you can get lost in it. It's definitely a time stealer. It will steal your time and your focus. So I encourage you to limit it, budget your time. But not just the dances, but the hacks. So I follow a couple people that had these little life hacks with TikTok, and so you need to click on it, and they show you things. I have learned so much in the last 2 years of just life hacks. So I'm going to share a couple with y'all. One of them was, did you know that you can clean your bathtub with an orange and sugar? You can put sugar on orange, you can scrub, you can clean your bathtub with that. I've been doing that. I found that you're supposed to put your deodorant on at night, not in the morning when you get dressed and shower. You're supposed to put it on the night before. Did y'all know that? You should, apparently some kind of chemical, something happens, and you're supposed to put it on. I didn't know this. Did you know that after you brush your teeth, you got the whole toothpaste thing going on, it's all foamy. You're supposed to just spit that out and leave the rest in there? You're not even supposed to gargle all that out. You're supposed to leave it in there? Did you know that? You should be writing this stuff down. I don't know why you're not writing this down. Here's another good hack, too. Is anyone... when their alarm goes off in the morning, you ever hit the snooze button? Twice, 3. My wife does it twice, 3. There's a hack for fixing that. If you, that's an alarm clock. See the snooze? I didn't know that. You can do that. That's legal. You can actually do that. You can actually, well, I mean, look at that. You're not going to snooze, are you? What? For like security or? Well, okay, we're not on home arrest. We just like to snooze. We're a little bit lazy. Okay, so pandemic's passed. I wanted to share some of those with you. We're not here really to talk about TikTok. We're not here to talk about snoozing on your alarm. We're here to talk about the second book of Timothy, the second letter that that Paul wrote to his friend Timothy. So we're going to talk about 2 Timothy, the first chapter. Is anybody in high school? Is anybody in Soul Sisters? Is anybody in politics? You might have spoken about this on Sunday. You might have covered a little bit of this on Sunday, and I'm going to kind of integrate some of it into my message today. We're talking about Paul, okay? We're talking about Paul. We're talking about his friendship with Timothy. We're going to talk about how that was important. And what I'm going to do for you today is I'm going to share with you what I call 4 life hacks from 2 Timothy. So if Paul was around today and he had a TikTok account and he was a good creator, he might put these hacks on TikTok for you. So I'm going to share them with you today. So without any further ado, my presentation is called 4 Life Hacks from 2 Timothy. Now, so that's where we are now. We can go ahead and click to the next one for me. My assistant today is Max right there. See, Max? Max, you're so young. Okay, in the very first, so here's what's happening. Let me give you a little background real quick. Paul is the Apostle Paul. He calls himself an apostle right here in this letter. He is completely devoted to God's will. He's got a young buddy named Timothy. He finds himself in jail. He's in the slammer. He writes a letter to his buddy Timothy, and he's encouraging him. And in these first few verses of the first chapter is what we're going to talk about today. So this is really a letter from jail. He's writing to his young buddy Timothy, so we'll talk a little bit about it. So he calls himself first an apostle of Jesus Christ according to the promise of life in Jesus Christ. He's an apostle. He's saying he's an apostle. He's saying, I'm about God's will. I'm not about my own. This is everything I'm doing here, Paul says, is about God's will for you and for us. He also, when he says, and the promise of life in Jesus Christ, when he's talking about the life, it's something real to him. Because at this point in jail, he doesn't really know if he's going to get out of jail. He don't know if he's going to get the death penalty because the Romans are pretty much tired of him. So execution may be in his future. As it turns out, he wasn't killed in this stay in jail, but he was arrested at a later point after some more ministry and another mission trip or so, and he was executed for his faith. But in this letter, it's really pressing on his mind this sense of life and death. This is either the last letter that he writes or one of the last letters that Paul writes. Certainly the last time he's going to talk to Timothy. But this is him addressing the church. He's taken Timothy under his wing. It's been 30 years since Jesus has passed away and resurrected, 30 years of Paul living out this faith, and Timothy is basically his mentee. He's a mentor. So hack number 1. This is hack number 1 for our lesson from 2 Timothy is get a mentor. Did anyone have a mentor in their life? No one has a mentor? If you have a mentor, raise your hand a little bit. Yes, okay. Okay, that's fine. You sort of kind of have a mentor. Maybe you have something more informal and you wouldn't call it a mentor, but maybe it's somebody a little bit older. They have some life experiences, and they really are a resource for you. It doesn't count your family. That's different. Those are relatives. Exactly. So as you go through Sunday school and you come to Refuge, you sit in big church, you understand that God does some crazy, wonderful, miraculous things. God does wonderful things, and most often he does those things through people. A mentor may be one of those people that he does these things through. And to paraphrase a commercial, a mentor knows things because a mentor has seen things. They've been around, and they're like I said, it's a great resource. Paul tells Timothy in the first chapter in verse 13, he says this. He says, hold fast the pattern of sound words which you have heard from me. And this implies 2 things. Paul's telling Timothy this. 1, hold fast to the pattern of sound words. He has established a pattern of sound words of truly a routine of wisdom, of goodness that he's sharing with Timothy. And Paul says, hold on to this. This is something you're going to need. But he also says that Timothy might have to hold on to this because there might be someone ready to come along and snatch it from him. So the faith that you have may not be, it may be something you need to guard. Matter of fact, we talk about it a little bit later in this lesson. Your faith may be something you need to guard because there may be someone or something that wants to come and snatch what you've acquired. So when I'm thinking about mentors, I'm a movie guy, so I like movies, so I'm starting to think in my mind, what are some movie examples that we can kind of connect with and we can get just a different idea of what a mentor is, and you may recognize some of this. So in one of my favorite movies is Lord of the Rings. So Frodo had a mentor. Who was his mentor? Gandalf on the front row. Nerd alert. Okay, and said, no, just kidding. Love this guy. Okay, and then, hold on just a minute, Max. Let me see. Another example I had was Cinderella. Cinderella had a fairy godmother. All right, there you go. Good deal. And let me see. My next one is Luke Skywalker had a Yoda? Obi? Yoda or Obi? Show us, Max. They said both. It's both. There's both in there. Yeah, he was lucky. He had two mentors. He had Yoda and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Shh. What? I haven't seen the last movie. I'm trying not to spoil here. Okay, so in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'm not a nerd. Anybody know anything about Marvel and the whole hero thing and how? Yeah, I'm not all in. Y'all know all this? Oh, sorry about that. Okay, well, so I want an example from that, so I picked Spider-Man because Spider-Man, Peter Parker, his mentor was. Oh wow, y'all could teach this. It was Tony Stark, exactly. Yeah. So. Spider-Man needed Iron Man. So y'all seen all the movies? Can I spoil or not? Y'all spoil? Well, I won't because there may be a couple people who want to see all 21 movies. But somebody pointed this out to me. Listen, somebody pointed this out to me, that in the movies that they share together and they're on screen together, where it's Peter Parker and Iron Man, Spider-Man, all their names, I don't know. Throughout every scene that they're together, Spider-Man calls him Mr. Stark. Mr. Stark, throughout the whole evolution of all these movies. And their last scene together, I'm just saying, he calls him Tony. Only one time in the whole series of these movies. This was a mentorship. This was a relationship that started where it was. It was a give and take. He called him Spider-Boy at one time. He said, no, I'm Spider-Man, right? They had a really good relationship, and they grew with each other. And it was a win-win for them. Toward the end, he called him Tony because it came a real friendship. This is something that Paul and Timothy would have experienced too. In their life together and in their relationship, they would have become true friends. Let's go back to Paul and Timothy real quick. What's their backstory? Do you know their backstory? You know Paul and Timothy's backstory a little bit. You probably heard it, but I'm going to review it for you real quick. So according to Timothy in the book of Acts, it's that Timothy was doing some awesome kingdom work. He's a young man. He's doing some awesome Christian work in his town of Lystra. So Paul met him on one of his little mission trips. He left. He was hearing good things. He went back. Once again, he finds him about the work of the kingdom. He's doing really, really good stuff. He's consistent, and he's catching Paul's eye. And in the early verses of chapter 1, Paul gives a real shout out to Timothy's family. He talks about Timothy's mom. Her name is Eunice, I think, and his grandma's Lois. I got it reversed? I'll just say this: Lois and Eunice are his grandma and mom. You can figure out the names. We'll figure out that. That's homework for y'all. So Lois and but it's great because in the whole scheme of things, in this letter that he's writing from the Bible for the Bible, it's going to be in our hands for thousands of years. Lois and Eunice get a little shout out because they are really just powerhouses of faith. These are really, really important women in the early church. And they had a distinct, very, very specific role in Timothy's life, young Timothy. Because another thing that we find out is that Timothy's dad was Greek, which might mean that he was more of a thinker than a believer, and he might not have been a follower of Christ. He might not have had the full revelation and knows what it means to submit to Jesus. So he may not have been. Now, maybe later something happened and that changed, but the Bible's pretty much silent on that. My point in telling this is that that Paul might have lived in a divided home spiritually, and he might have had a strong mother and grandmother, but he might have had a father and a grandfather that weren't believers, and that might have caused a little bit of friction. You can imagine how it would cause friction in any family. That might be what he experienced at that time. Maybe it was important for Timothy at this time to have a really strong Christian man in his life, and that's exactly what Timothy was. It was almost like it was meant to be. This is what we see in the book of Acts, and also in the letters to Timothy. So upon leaving Lystra for the second time, he goes to Lystra, sees Timothy again. He says, "Hey, why don't you tag along with me? I got work to do. Why don't you come with me on another mission trip?" And Timothy agrees. He says, "Sure." And this was an enduring, very positive relationship between Paul and Timothy. So this is a picture of mentorship and of kind of a fraternal Christian love that they have for each other. This is a great, great picture for us. So it's, like I said, it's a win, not even just a win-win, it's a win-win-win in this situation because it's good for Paul. Paul's building a legacy here. He's basically contributing to the future of the church. Timothy is learning the ropes, figuring out how to do things, and the kingdom wins as well. God's kingdom wins as well. This is a really, really good opportunity. Paul calls Timothy his beloved son there. You see in the second verse, he calls him his beloved son. It's a pretty tight relationship. It's really, really a good thing. I was thinking about this also. I'm going to kind of shift back to our movies. And I mentioned that Timothy may have lived in a home that was spiritually divided, right? And so he may not have been able to count on two full-fledged parents pouring a bunch of Christian love into him. And this is something that also recurs in the movies that we watch. So Max and I put together a couple of images here. I want you to see some examples here. Superman is one of them. This is a movie character. He lost his dad on planet Krypton. You know, he's like an orphan. He came to Earth. But also, you'll notice that Luke and what's her name? I was just testing you. Luke and Leia, right? Orphans. Also, next, Cinderella. She didn't have her mom, and she definitely had some stepmom issues. I don't know if anybody's got stepmom issues. It happens, but she had stepmom issues. What about this guy? That's Bruce Wayne, a.k.a. Batman. He saw his mom and dad murdered in the street, right? So he definitely had a void in his life. He definitely needed a mentor. What about Peter Parker? Peter Parker was already lost his parents and then went to live with his aunt and uncle, and then his uncle died. Am I right or what? Am I right? All right, good deal. What about Tarzan? That's not his mom. That's not his mom. What about this guy, Nemo? No, that's Nemo. Is Nemo blue? No. Say it again. Y'all know that? That's like this on the second row. I feel so bad for you. Okay, so how do you know the difference? Is it the fin or is it the... There's no scale. How do you know? Oh, it's the shape. I was clearly underprepared for the level of nerdness that I was going to find here. I'm overwhelmed. Well, Max, I'm going to blame that on you. You didn't tell me this earlier. You're so young. All right, so what about, is this next one? Is that the Little Mermaid or is that her mom? The Little Mermaid. What? I know, but she doesn't have a mom and a dad. That's my point. There's a void. There's something missing. What about Dumbo? No. Look it up. What about that's your cue, Max. Mowgli. That's the Jungle Boy. Wait a minute, that's you. Take your glasses off. All right. What about this? What about Bambi? What about Peter Pan? What about Pinocchio? What about Belle? What about Lilo? What about the chicks from Frozen? Hey, these are all people who have an absence. Okay? These are people who are really in need of someone really mature to come along. And most of these movies, that was provided. Okay? It's a part of the story. Why does this happen? Imagine this. You're orphaned. First off, you're orphaned, and you got to save Gotham City or the galaxy or Arendelle or whatever. Imagine that. You got a lot on your plate. You got a lot to do. It's a lot of pressure. So most of the point is that these characters here, they have, well, no, they need a sensei. But what they need is this. If you do or if you don't. These characters that I've put all on the screen here, that we put, they don't have two parents that are physically present, that are emotionally available, that are spiritually supportive. They don't have that, okay? It's a good example, okay? It's a good example. But they had a mentor. There's always somebody, a character, someone here that helps bring them along. So if you find yourself in an environment, a situation where you may have stepmom or stepdad issues, it happens. This is real life. You may not have someone who's really always emotionally supportive. That's fine. You may have people that are physically present. There's a whole lot of situations. It happens tons of time that young people find themselves with less than 2 parents that are really in a great spiritual place that are pouring into their kids. Sometimes you get caught in the gaps. That's when you need a mentor. So I think it's a great example. So a mentor like Paul did for Timothy is going to give you some guidance. It's going to be good encouragement. They're going to be very supportive. It's also accountability. It's going to keep us accountable in our walk. This is why a mentor is important. Paul writes in verse 4, we'll go to the next one. He says that he's filled with joy when I call to remembrance the genuine faith that is in you. He's recognizing that Timothy has a real faith. He's not faking it. Paul's calling out and said, this is something that's real. And don't we all want somebody to be filled with joy when they think about us? Isn't it awesome? Isn't that an awesome thought that you have somebody out there, when they think of you, Natalie, that they're filled with joy? Isn't it awesome to be greeted when you show up with a smile? Johan, is it nice when you come in and people are like, Johan, as opposed to, it is good. It's good for everybody. You should greet your friends like that. You should greet them with a big smile, run to them and hug them. People need that, and you could be the one to give it. But if you have a mentor, that's what a mentor does. This is not necessarily a family member, but it's somebody who's mature, somebody who's full of the faith, and it's someone who prays for you and they love you. Get a mentor, okay? So we have a mentoring program here. It's high school, right? At the high school age, be really thinking about what it means, mentorship, okay? If you're here in high school now and you don't have a mentor, okay, this is something, because we always start back up, right? It's always something we do. I recommend you do this. Let's just say that you think, that's perfect for me. I'm a perfect candidate to have a mentor. Think of somebody in your life that would be a good mentor, someone that you would draw closer to, maybe someone that you know and your family knows, and go and ask that person, say, hey, I'm looking for a mentor. How does that happen? And then maybe they'll pray about it, and who knows? Maybe they will talk to Mike, and maybe they'll talk to their wife, and maybe they'll talk to your parent. That might be your mentor, or it may be somebody else. But mentorship is something, it's a godly thing, and it's something where 2 people can really, really grow together. It's good for both people. It's also, like I said, good for God's kingdom. Okay, so hack number 1, get a mentor. Hack number 2 that we find in the second letter from Timothy is disregard the haters. Ignore the haters. Haters. Okay, so this is a sad principle. I'm going to tell you now. If you don't know it, if you haven't heard it, this is a little bit of a downer, but I'm going to tell you. If you're doing what's good, right, in your life, you're doing what's right, you're doing what's noble, what's helpful, what's productive, you're doing what seems logical to you. Maybe somebody even very close to you is going to question you, they're going to criticize you, and they may even condemn you for doing that. That's not fair, is it? That's not fair. It's going to happen. That exists while you're 12 years old. It will exist when you're 22 and when you're 52. That's going to happen. There'll be people around that are just negative. Why does this happen? Somebody tell me, why does it happen? Sir? Somebody ate their ice cream? Is that just a church answer? I'm going to need more. I'm going to need you to go a little deeper. He just said sin. It is sin, but what specifically? Go deeper and come back to me. Huh? Ooh, that's very good. Yeah, there's maybe some unresolved issues themselves. Yes, sir. That's one of my answers. Jealousy. Have you been looking at my notes? All right. Boy, you went really deep. You went all the way back to. That's true. Well, in your school, later on when you get a job, even if you work in church, you're going to have people. You're going to have some great ideas. And somebody's going to greet those ideas with, we've never done it like that. Or they're going to say, that'll never work. Or they'll say, like, thanks, but no thanks. Okay? And it's a really, really good idea. You're going to feel pressed or dismissed. You'll feel judged. And maybe even people might mock you. But the life hack from this chapter of 2 Timothy is to ignore the haters. This is something that Paul would have told Timothy. Get the names right. He would have told him this. Your success, your joy, your optimism is sometimes a magnet for just a long line of people that are going to come and scoff at you. They're going to roll their eyes at you. They might make fun of you. I know it's sad, but this is reality. So I'll give you some grown-up talk today. It's going to happen. So when you escape one little hater in your life, one's going to pop right up in their absence. You get, this guy right here. Thank you, Max. When one hater moves on, another one will come. When you've transformed one hater into someone that loves you and you love them, don't worry, somebody else will come along. That will always happen. You'll always be alone. And you'll get better at dealing with it. And I know it's frustrating, but this is real. This is real. This is a really sad part of the world, grown up or for kids. So, I don't know who that guy is, but I'm probably think people are jealous of him because he's got a trophy, first off. He does have a trophy, and he's rocking an awesome mullet. So I'm thinking that people are probably jealous of some of what he has. He just guys just doesn't care. Sometimes it's nice to not care. But like you said, people are filled with jealousy. They're filled with insecurity. They have what else they have? They have maybe a sense of abandonment because y'all were friends, and now you've excelled, and you are on a really, really on a high. You're going places. You made some good decisions, and you're just moving right along. And they're stuck back here. They're jealous. They feel like you've abandoned them. There's a lot of envy going on. Or maybe they got some issues and they're projecting onto you. You mean? They're hating on you, but really it's something they hate about themselves. Y'all have hit on this. Y'all have actually probably had some experience with this. Hopefully you're managing the haters well and you are not the haters yourselves. Is anybody here a hater? You can raise your hand if you are. Sometimes. It's hard. It's good to be honest too. Well, look here. So if you are sometimes a hater, sometimes that's a shortcut. That's a shortcut. And it's really not acceptable because this is what's going on. You really need to go a little bit deeper inside and see what's going on and resolve those things. So the pressure of being judged for your success or for your joy or for the good things that you're doing, it's scary. And it's scary enough to make you kind of want to hide your faith, hide yourself, just check out of the world. But you can't do that. That's not what we're called to do. Or maybe we feel like hate them right back, like double. We're like, just switch it up all the way to 11 on the hate. But you can't do that either. That's not acceptable at all. But Paul says, when Paul says this to Timothy, he recognizes his tears. In verse 4, he recognizes his tears. And he goes, because he knows that Timothy's probably found some resistance in his walk. So he says, he recognizes that in the very first, some of the first verses. I think verse 4, he says, he acknowledges the tears that Timothy has shed. And he knows there's been some resistance there. If Timothy had resistance, you'll have resistance. If Jesus had resistance, you'll have resistance. So Timothy, we know this, that Timothy felt scared sometimes. People were surely persecuting him. They were trying to snatch away his faith. And Paul wanted Timothy to know that his fear wasn't something that was from God. It was something here. It was all about the fruit, like you said. This comes from that. It's just something that's not part of God's plan for us to fear things like this. Fearing people who hate us, people who want us to have a setback, people who don't want us to get ahead. Paul tells him in verse 7, he says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind." He also goes on to say, "I am not ashamed, for I know whom I believed, and I'm persuaded that he is able to keep what I have committed to him." So this is Paul encouraging Timothy with his experiences with Jesus. So you have people that want to do you harm or people who don't want to encourage you. How can you turn this around into something positive? I got a little quote here I like. It says, "What stands in your way can be a way." What stands in your way can be a way. Something is in your path. You can actually use that experience to persevere and to move forward. It can be an element of your persistence, and your persistence can be something that leads to an enduring faith. Persevering beyond the people that would hate you, it fortifies your faith, it strengthens your resolve, and it prepares your heart and your mind to do greater assignments, greater missions for God's kingdom. This is an exercise. This is something you'll have to deal with. And when you deal with this and you dealt with it successfully, check, 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 God's got something better for you ahead. So be encouraged. I like the idea of a stumbling block being a stepping stone. So the idea that anything that you could stumble on could also be something that would just could move you, promote you in your life, move you ahead. What stands in your way can be a way. All right. So hack 1 was get a mentor. Hack 2, ignore the haters. Hack 3, good habits. Make good habits. Prayer should be one of those. So I got a slide here. Click it one time there, Max, and see what we can read here. It says, I wrote this, hide his word in your heart in his hand, and his hand in your life. You follow this. These are elements of of the beginning of some very good habits. Check and see if it corresponds to the habits that you're doing right now. Hide his word in your heart in his hand, and his hand in your life. How can we recall 100 movie plots, tons of tips or tricks or cheat codes on your video games, numerous TV episodes, or like I said, songs, but we don't know God's plan for us? We haven't put the same work into knowing what God's plan is for us. How can that be? There seems like there's a disconnect there. It's been said that our habits, there's a slide right here too, I like this. It says, our habits are too light to notice until they become too heavy to break. Think about that for a minute. You gotta read that to yourself. Your bad habits are too light to notice until they become too heavy to break. So you can think to yourself, you don't have to scream out loud, the habits you have, that you know these habits are not getting you closer to where God wants you to be. Think about these habits. And you dismiss them because it's not that big of a deal. You don't even notice them until you do notice them. And they're overwhelming at that point. And they've overwhelmed you, and they've overwhelmed your life. And they start finding themselves between you and the things that God has for you. Whether that's school, whether that's your relationship with your family, or maybe it's your relationship with God. These little habits can become really, really something that's insidious. That's a good Marvel Cinematic Universe word, insidious. I like that. What we need to do is we need to take these bad habits, do a little inventory, take these bad habits that are getting between you and God, like an obstacle, and exchange those for good habits. And this is something that Paul has for Timothy as well. You can pray intentionally about making Jesus a priority in your life. You can pray that you'll memorize Scripture instead of hip-hop choruses. I know some people can know every word to every song, but they don't know Scripture. If that's you, do something with that. You can pray that you can be emotionally and spiritually prepared for the message you're going to hear on a Sunday morning or the passage that you're going to read before you go to sleep. Pray just really fervently that God has something special for you, and get serious about it. Paul's approach. So while in jail, the slammer, what's another word for jail? The hokey. I like that. What else? No, it's not torturing. No, I'm not thinking that one. The clink. How do you know all these jail terms? Never mind. I don't want to know. Okay, I know you do. This guy knows 17 synonyms for jail. All right, you know the who's gal? You ever heard of the who's gal? Yeah, the who's gal is that's different. That's like the top floor of a hotel. That's a nice place to be. All right, let's move on. So while in jail, the clink, the slammer, the pokey, Paul couldn't preach and he couldn't lay hands on people. This is something very common for Paul. He couldn't preach, he couldn't lay hands on people, but what he could do is he could pray. And when can you pray? Are you in jail? I don't know if you've been in jail. I'm not asking that, but I know you're not in jail now, so you can pray. So he says in verse 3, he goes, without ceasing, I remember you in my prayers night and day. Paul made a habit of lifting up the people that were most precious to him in prayer. Paul was a praying man. Paul prayed a lot. We could take his example. He told Timothy the same thing. He says, without ceasing, I remember you in my prayers. He prayed. So number 3 hack, pray. Number 4 hack, pursue your purpose and avoid shortcuts. You ever shortcuts? Anybody ever try to shortcut? How do shortcuts work? Sometimes they're great, but sometimes they're not. Anybody got an example of a shortcut that didn't work? That didn't work? Oh, you got one that does. I want one that didn't work. When I was a kid, I used to do this. I don't know if you've done this or not. I'm just going to put it out there. I used to, if I had to change my pants, I would try to change my pants without taking off my shoes. Anybody ever try to do that? Change your pants without taking them? It's a mistake. Because then it takes you One time it took me 3 days to change my pants. I'm not lying. Just kidding. It didn't take me 3 days. But, you're thinking, I've shortcut. I'm too lazy to take off my shoes and tie them back. So I'm going to take my pants off over my shoes. It was miserable. Has anyone else got anything like that? Please. On the cat, and the cat died. Oh, yeah, okay, good. Well, don't add that to your story. I just was just like freelancing. That's true. Or you want to unplug something and you don't want to go unplug it. You just pull it out from the wall like the cord. That's not a good idea either. Yes? Cheat. Oh. Are the answers still in the back of the textbook? On some of your textbooks? I don't know if that's... do y'all have textbooks? I don't even know if y'all have textbooks. Do you know the story of Little Red Riding Hood? Little Red Riding Hood, she's got a picnic basket. She put some stuff in there. She put some sandwiches, some pie, some tacos, and some salsa. And she's going to meet Grandma, and her mom tells her something specific. I don't know if you know this part of the story, but her mom tells her, what does she tell her when she's going to visit Grandma? Don't eat the food, what? Don't talk to strangers, but in my version, she tells her the route to go. Go straight there. Don't take a shortcut through the woods. And she did take a shortcut through the woods, and that's where she met the wolf or wolf man or the whatever he was. Yeah, so I think the lesson there is that you obey your parents, but a little sub-lesson is don't take shortcuts. Paul tells Timothy not to take shortcuts in his faith. He tells him to be real. So Little Red Riding Hood, get-rich-quick schemes. One time I got an email that said I had inherited a bunch of money from the Nigerian prince. I was for sure that I had actually won what? Scam. So I clicked on it, see? And then I just wanted some personal information. So I put in some banking information. What could go wrong? I thought I would be rich, and I wasn't. No, it's a scam. I didn't really do that. But, yeah, get rich quick. That's a shortcut. These are all examples of shortcuts. You can buy things to make you happy. Anyone ever goes, I need to go shopping because I feel sad? It's really a shortcut. It's a shortcut, people. Buying a new pair of shoes is not going to change your life. Unless you're Cinderella, and then a new pair of shoes to change her life. Okay, so these are shortcuts. Also, what about with your friends, your little peer group? They want to do something bad. You just want to go along so you can get along. You ever go along to get along? Who's going to know? Yeah, that's a shortcut. That's a shortcut to get where you want to be. And this is something that Paul's telling Timothy, don't do it. There are phony, baloney people in your life, okay? They're fake. They're fake. They're fake. There are some people who are pretending to be, there are people who are pretending to be really, really strong Christians. But like we might have talked about a little bit Sunday, it's a caricature. They take what they think a Christian should be, they say the right things, they go to the right places, but their heart's not right. And Paul is recognizing Timothy as the opposite of that. He said, you have a genuine faith. They have bad habits. They're perpetuating bad habits. And they need something to change in their lives. In verse 5, Paul describes Timothy's genuine faith. Timmy's not faking it. Timothy's not faking it. He's the real deal. So like Timothy, your ultimate purpose in your life is to fulfill 100% of your potential. That's with and for and through God. The God who made you, the God who protects you, and the God who loves you. And you can do it without shortcuts. In verse 6, he says this right here. He says, Paul tells Timothy to stir up the gift which is in you. This is, we're in our last hack now. Remember, this is fulfilling your purpose. Stir up the gift which is in you. Stir it up. God has given you a gift, but your role is to stir it up. We're not robots. God doesn't program us, put us in some transistors. I don't even know if transistors are a thing anymore, but he doesn't put like chips in us, and then we just march on. There's an element of your own will. There's a component where you have to choose, and you have to do something. And Timothy's being told here by Paul, he says, stir up the flame. He says, stir up the gift which is in you. This is what your role is. So Timothy, no less than 24 times in his 2 letters, Timothy is told by Paul to be bold. In some version of you need to be bold. So we think Timothy might have been a little timid. He might have been a little bit scared. So Timothy needed encouragement, and Paul gave it to him. So this reminds us that God's work in us is not just, we're not just passive. God gives us a little bit of a gift, we need to stir it like a big bonfire that's kind of decaying. Somebody needs to come and stir up the logs and get the flames going again. This is something that was very important to Paul. You got to stir up the gift. So I'm going to conclude real quick. I'm thankful for Paul's wisdom. I'm glad that he wrote these letters from the clink, the pokey, the jail, or whatever, so that we can, almost 2,000 years later, we can actually benefit from the wisdom that Paul had for Timothy as well. So here's the 4 things. Zach's going to come up real quick, but here's the 4 things. Think about a mentor. What a mentor would be. If you got one, thank them. Second is, what was the second one? Ignore the haters. Haters are going to hate. The third one, develop good habits. Make some good habits, and no shortcuts. And finally, it is pursue God's purpose in your life. Paul, wait a minute. Zachary Moore, come on up. That's all I have for y'all. It's good to see y'all today. Maybe I can come back. I'm going to be back here in about 2 years, so y'all be here, okay?